It was just after 6 in the evening. A Wednesday. A holiday. The kind of evening when a country is home with its own. Then the floor moved. In Caracas, they felt it first as a sway. Glass humming, doors swinging on their hinges. People rose from their chairs and ran for the stairs. Out into the street, into the open, into the light. And for a moment, it stopped. The shaking eased. The dust began to settle. The body did what the body does. It exhaled. It thought the worst was over. 39 seconds. That is all the ground gave them. Then it struck again. And this time, harder. No one had time to be ready. That is the part that stays with you. The first quake was not a warning. It was the first blow. And before the walls could finish trembling, before a single building could find its balance again, the second came, larger than the first, falling on a country already on its knees. The scientists have a cold word for it. A doublet. Two great ruptures, almost as one. The earth tearing in two places before it could rest between them. They will tell you it is rare. And it is. But I am not here tonight to talk to you about geology. I am here because of those 39 seconds. Because there is a pattern in those seconds. A pattern older than Venezuela. Older than the fault lines beneath it. The pattern of how warnings come to a world that has stopped listening. They do not come once, and politely. They come, and then they come again, closer together each time, harder each time, with less room to breathe in between. The ancients had a name for this too. They called them birth pains. And the strange mercy of a birth pain is that it tells you something is coming while there is still time to prepare for it. The question is whether anyone is counting them. I want you to notice the day, the 24th of June. In Venezuela, that is a national holiday. The day they remember an old battle, an old freedom, a day of pride, a day at home with the family, which is exactly why so many were inside when the buildings came down. The very thing that should have kept them safe is what placed them in the path of it. Sit with that for a moment. How often the ground we trust most is the ground that gives way first. The house, the savings, the system we were told would hold. Scripture is full of men who built on such ground. And Scripture is full of the morning after. We are living in one of those mornings now. I know how this sounds to some of you. Every age has had its earthquakes. Every generation has watched something fall and feared the end. That is true. I will not pretend it isn't. The men who heard the prophets felt the same. So did the ones who laughed at Noah. But there is a difference between a sign and a coincidence, and the difference is rarely the event itself. It is the timing. It is the gathering. It is how many of them arrive in the same season, pressing in from every side at once. One tremor is weather. A doublet, two, before the first has even stilled, is something the soul recognizes, even when the mind argues. So I want to do something careful tonight. I want to walk back through the old words, the ones written long before anyone mapped a fault line, and lay them beside what we just watched. Not to frighten you. Fear is cheap, and it fades by morning. But to show you something that does not fade. There is a reason the earth was chosen to speak. There is a reason it speaks in pairs now, and in the space of a minute. And there is a reason it spoke over a nation that the world had already half forgotten. Most people heard the news and moved on. They counted the dead and changed the channel. But a few of you felt something you couldn't name. That feeling is not paranoia. By the end of this, you will know exactly what it was. Long before the first city, the ground was already speaking. It split at Sinai while a nation watched and trembled. It opened its mouth in the wilderness and swallowed men whole. It shook the foundations of a prison until the doors fell open. It tore in the hour a carpenter died on a hill outside the wall. The veil ripped from top to bottom, and the rock split with it. Read the old accounts, and you notice something. The earth was never a bystander. It answered, it grieved, it warned. When men would not speak, the stones did. When prophets were stoned and ignored, the ground itself took up the message. This is not poetry I'm inventing. It is the oldest pattern in the book. The earth has always been the last witness left standing. And there was one who sat on a hillside and was asked a question. Tell us, his friend said, when will these things be? What will be the sign that the age is closing? He did not give them a date. He gave them a list. Nation rising against nation, kingdom against kingdom, famines, plagues, fearful sights, and earthquakes, he said, in divers places. Then he said the strangest thing of all. All these are the beginning of sorrows. The beginning, not the end. The word he chose was the word for a woman's first contraction. The first pain that tells her the hour has finally come. He was not describing a disaster. He was describing a labor. Think about what a contraction is. It is not one event. It is a series. The first comes, and you can almost dismiss it. A long quiet follows, and you tell yourself it was nothing. Then another, and the quiet is shorter. Then another, and shorter still. No mother counts the pain itself. She counts the space between, because the space is the message. When the gaps close, the hour is near. That is the whole architecture of the prophecy. Not a single blow, but blows that gather. Not one shaking, but shakings that crowd together until there is no rest left between them. 39 seconds is a very small space. The prophets understood this rhythm. One of them stood in the ruins of a temple and heard a voice say something almost unbearable. Yet once more I will shake, and not the earth only, but the heavens, the sea, the dry land, all of it. I will shake the nations, the voice said, and the desire of all nations shall come. He was speaking of a shaking that had not finished, a final one, a greater one, still ahead. Centuries later, another man picked up that same word. He said this shaking had a purpose. That God shakes what can be shaken precisely so that what cannot be shaken will remain. The earthquake is not the punishment. It is the sorting. So when I watch a doublet tear through a coastline, I am not watching a freak of plate tectonics. Or rather, I am, and I am watching more than that. I am watching an old grammar, the grammar of a world being shaken on purpose, not to destroy what is real, but to expose what was only ever pretending to be solid. The tower men trusted, the wealth men hoarded, the borders men drew, the peace men announced. All of it sways in the same tremor, and in the swaying, you finally learn what was load-bearing and what was only paint on a wall. That is what the ancients meant. They were not afraid of the shaking. They were afraid of being caught building on the wrong thing. There is a sentence men have repeated in every age: peace and safety. Two words a civilization says to itself when it wants to sleep, and the whole letter answers it without mercy. When they shall say peace and safety, then sudden destruction comes upon them, as travail upon a woman with child. There's the word again. Travail. Labor, the contraction. And they shall not escape, it says. Not because no one warned them, but because the warnings had become background noise. A headline, a donation, a moment of silence. Then the channel changes. The tragedy was never that the sign came. The tragedy was that it came and came again, and the gaps kept closing, and still no one was counting. Now bring your eyes back to this decade, not to one country, to the whole map at once, because that is where the pattern hides. Look at how the last few years have arrived. Not in single events you could absorb and recover from, but in pairs, in clusters, in waves that overlap. A plague was barely behind us when the wars began. One war had not cooled before another opened. Markets that were supposed to be unshakable shook. Currencies men trusted for a lifetime trembled in a season. Famine warnings stacked on supply lines already breaking. And the gaps between them, have you noticed? The gaps are not what they used to be. We barely finish grieving one before the next arrives. The world is being given less and less room to exhale. That is the real shape of the doublet. It is not only what happened beneath Venezuela, it is what is happening to the whole age. The second blow falling before the first has stilled. And I want you to look at where it fell. Not on a strong nation, not on a steady one, on a country that had already collapsed once, a place where the money had already failed, where the shelves had already emptied, where more than 7 million people had already fled. One of the largest exoduses the hemisphere has ever seen. The buildings that came down were already cracked, already weakened by years of neglect no one could afford to fix. The first quake loosened them. The second brought them to the ground. Hold that image, because it is the whole sermon. A house does not fall in the second quake alone. It falls because the first one already opened the seams, because the maintenance was deferred for years, because someone decided the cracks could wait. And then the morning came when they could not wait any longer. This is not only masonry. You know it isn't. It is the picture of every life that postpones the deep questions. We patch the surface. We repaint the front. We tell ourselves the foundation can be dealt with later. And the shaking does not care about our schedule. It comes on a holiday. It comes at dinner. It comes 39 seconds after we decided we were safe. The structures that survive a doublet are the ones that were built right before the trouble ever came. There is something else in the timing I cannot let pass. The relief came. It always does now. Ships were ordered, aircraft loaded, money pledged in the millions. Nations that quarrel over everything else moved fast to be seen helping. And there is good in that. Real good. Lives are pulled from rubble. But watch the reflex underneath it. The instinct of the age is to manage the aftermath. To count, to fund, to rebuild, to move on. We have become very skilled at responding to signs and completely unpracticed at reading them. We treat the warning as a logistics problem, as if the only question an earthquake asks is how quickly we can return things to the way they were. But returning to the way things were is not always the mercy we think. Because the way things were is exactly what was being shaken. The prophets never prayed for things to go back to normal. Normal was the disease. Normal was the temple turned into a marketplace. Normal was the altar tended while the heart went cold. Normal was peace and safety on the lips and rot in the foundations no one would name. When the ground spoke, it was not interrupting the order of things. It was telling the truth about an order that had already failed. The kindest thing a warning can do is refuse to let you go back to sleep. And the cruelest thing we can do with a warning is rebuild the same house on the same fault and call it recovery and wait without counting for the next 39 seconds. So I am not asking whether the relief should come. It should. I am asking a different question, the one the age avoids. What is the shaking trying to expose? What in this world was only ever paint on a wall? The system that promised it would always provide. The leaders who promised the worst was behind us. The comfort that told us prophecy was for another century. All of it sways now in the same tremor. And the swaying is not the catastrophe. The swaying is the diagnosis. It is the ground saying, gently and then not gently, that something built among us cannot stand. The men of the old world heard that diagnosis and called it foolishness. The few who believed it built differently. And when the shaking came, only one group was still standing. Now I have to turn this, because there is a piece you have not seen yet. We have talked about the shaking as judgment, as warning, as the closing of the gaps. And all of that is true. But there is a word hidden inside this event that changes the whole color of it. The scientists, without meaning to, handed us the key. They said the first quake was not the real one. They called it the foreshock, the smaller blow that comes before the great one. And the second, the larger, they called the main shock. Now hold those two words in your hand, foreshock, main shock, because that is not only seismology, that is the architecture of every warning God has ever sent. A foreshock is a strange mercy. It is the smaller tremor that arrives first, just large enough to be felt, just early enough that, if you understood it, you would have time to move. Most foreshocks are only recognized after the fact. We feel them, shrug, and stay in the building. We only learn what they were when the larger one proves what they were warning of. And here is the unbearable thing about Venezuela. The foreshock gave them 39 seconds. 39 seconds is not much, but it is not nothing. For some, those seconds in the doorway were the difference. The warning was small. The warning was real. The warning was enough. Now lift your eyes off that one coastline and ask the question that should keep you up tonight. If that was the foreshock, not of an earthquake, but of an age, then what is the main shock? Everything we have lived through, the plagues, the wars, the failing markets, the ground splitting in divers places, exactly as he said. What if all of it is the foreshock? The smaller tremor. Felt, shrugged at, survived. The mercy that arrives before the main event, just large enough to be noticed, just early enough that, if we understood it, we would have time to move. The old letter never promised the shaking would stay small. It promised that the small ones come first, on purpose, as a gift. This is the turn most people miss entirely. They hear about prophecy and they brace for wrath. They imagine a God impatient to destroy. But a foreshock is not the act of a God who wants you buried. It is the act of a God who wants you in the doorway, who would rather warn you with a tremor than take you with the wall. The shaking that frightens you is the same shaking that is trying to save you. That is the thing the world cannot hold in its hands at once. That judgment and mercy can wear the same face. That the rumble under your feet is not only the floor giving way. It is a voice older than the rock, saying move, while there is still a space to move into. And the space is what I keep coming back to. 39 seconds. The gap between the warning and the wait. We do not get to choose how long the gap is. We only get to choose what we do inside it. The man who understands the foreshock is already moving in the first second. The man who argues with it is still arguing when the wall comes down. Same tremor, same warning, same 39 seconds. Two completely different mornings after. The difference was never the size of the quake. It was whether he believed the small one enough to act before the large one proved him right. That is the whole of it. That is what the prophets were begging a deaf world to understand. The warning is the mercy. The gap is the grace. Do not waste the seconds. So look again at the thing you scrolled past this week. 2 ruptures. 1 minute, a forgotten nation. A holiday turned to mourning. The world filed it under tragedy and moved on. But you are not the world. You felt something when you first heard it, and now you know its name. It was recognition. The soul knowing a foreshock when it feels one. The body in the doorway before the mind has finished arguing. The question the earth asked Venezuela is the same question it is asking the whole age, and it is asking it of you tonight in the room you are sitting in. Not how strong was the quake, not how high the death toll climbed. The question is simpler and far harder. When the main shock comes, and it will, where will you be standing? Let me take this off the map now. Off the news, off the fault lines, away from the numbers, because the prophets never let their listeners hide in the global. They always brought it down to the single chest, to the one heart in the one room on the one ordinary night. So I am bringing it down to yours. You did not feel the ground move this week. The walls of your house held, the lights stayed on, the floor stayed flat. And yet, here you are, still listening, when you could have closed this an hour ago. That is its own kind of tremor. A small one. A foreshock of your own. Something in you would not let you look away. I think you already know why. Because the truth is, the earthquake was never only out there. We all carry our own fault lines. The seam we never repaired. The thing we deferred because the surface still looked fine. The conversation we keep postponing. The reckoning we keep rescheduling for a quieter season that somehow never comes. We are all, every one of us, deferring the maintenance somewhere. Telling ourselves the foundation can wait. That the cracks are cosmetic. That we will get to the deep thing later when life calms down. When the children are grown. When the money is steadier. When there is finally time. And the shaking, when it comes, never checks our calendar. It comes on the holiday. It comes at dinner. It comes 39 seconds early. I am not telling you this to frighten you. I told you at the start, fear is cheap, and it fades by morning. I am telling you because there is still a gap. You are alive. You are listening. The wall has not come down. That is the gap. That is the grace. That is the 39 seconds. And the worst thing you could do with this hour is feel a brief and holy chill, and then patch the surface and repaint the front and go back to deferring the only thing that matters. To rebuild the same house on the same fault and call the chill a passing mood. The men who survived the doublet are not the ones who felt the most. They are the ones who moved while there was still somewhere to move. Feeling is not the same as moving. It never was. So let me ask you the only question this whole night was built around. What are you standing on? Not what do you believe in the abstract. Not what you would say if someone asked you at a dinner table. What is actually load-bearing in your life? When the floor moved under those families, the things they grabbed for tell the truth about them. Some reached for their phones, some for their gold, some for the door, and some for each other, and some for the one name men only remember in the falling. You will not choose what you reach for in that second. The reaching will simply reveal what you built on in all the seconds before it. The doorway you run to in the quake is the one you decided on long before the ground ever moved. There is a kind of peace that cannot survive a doublet. The peace of a man who has simply not been tested yet. Peace and safety on the lips of someone who has never felt the floor sway. And there is another peace entirely. The peace of a man who has already settled what he stands on, who has done the deep repair, who has stopped deferring the foundation, and who, when the tremor comes, does not panic. Not because he is brave, but because he is not standing on anything that can fall. That is the peace the prophets pointed to, not the absence of shaking, the presence of something the shaking cannot reach. One of these two pieces is a lie that feels like comfort. The other is comfort that has already survived the truth. You are living in a counted hour. We all are. Not a fearful one, a clear one. The age is shaking, and the gaps are closing, and you have been given the rarest thing of all. A foreshock you can still recognize as a foreshock, while there is still a gap to act inside. Most of the world will not use it. They will read the headline and refill the cup and go back to the house on the fault. But you stayed to the end of this. Something would not let you leave. And I think it is the same thing that kept a few men building strangely while their neighbors laughed at the ark. They were not smarter. They were not afraid in the ordinary way. They had simply started counting the gaps, and they could hear the hour. So we come back to where we began, to an evening just after 6 on a holiday in a city at rest, to the sway and the stairs and the open street, to the moment the body exhaled and believed the worst was past, and to the 39 seconds. I have carried you a long way from that coastline tonight, through the old accounts and the prophets and the labor of an age. And now I want to set you back down exactly there, in the gap, in the doorway, in the small, holy pause between the warning and the wait, because that is where you actually live, not in the catastrophe, not in the aftermath. In the seconds before, that almost no one notices they are inside. The foreshock has already come in 100 forms for years. The only question left is whether you have started to move. The earth has always been the last witness left standing. When the prophets were silenced, it spoke. When the temple turned cold, it shook the foundations. When a man died on a hill, it tore from the inside out. And it is speaking still, in pairs now. In the space of a single minute, over a nation the world had already half forgotten. It is not speaking because God is impatient to bury us. It is speaking because He would rather find us in the doorway. The shaking that frightens you is the shaking that is trying to save you. Judgment and mercy, wearing the same face, saying the same word the rock has always said. Move. While there is still a space to move into, that is what you felt when you first heard the news. Not paranoia. Recognition, the oldest instinct the soul has. I told you we were going to do something careful tonight, not to add another fear to a life already full of them, but to take a thing the world filed under tragedy and let you see what it actually was. A foreshock, a counted gap, a mercy disguised as a disaster. You will hear the death toll climb in the coming days. You will see the ships and the aid and the rebuilding. And most people will watch all of it as a logistics problem to be solved and forgotten. You will not be able to. Something has shifted in how you hear it now. You will hear the question underneath the rubble, the one the ground was asking all along. Not how strong was the quake, but what in you was only ever paint on a wall. He told them it would be like a woman in labor, and he meant it as comfort, though it rarely lands that way. Because a labor, for all its pain, is not the end of something. It is the violent beginning of something being born. The contractions that terrify are the contractions that deliver. The shaking that brings down the house built on the fault is the same shaking that proves what was built on rock. He shakes what can be shaken, the old letter says, for one reason and one only: that what cannot be shaken would remain. So when the gaps close, and they are closing, the question was never whether you would be shaken. Everything that can be shaken will be. The only question is what is left when the shaking is done. And that you decide now, not in the quake, now, in the gap. If something in this hour found you, if you felt the recognition I have been describing, that small tremor that would not let you look away, then do one honest thing with it before the feeling fades. Stay close to this channel, because we are counting the gaps here, together, and I would rather you not count them alone. And send this to 5 people you know, not the ones who will agree and move on. The 5 who are still living in the house on the fault, who deferred the foundation, who need their own 39 seconds. You might be the foreshock God sends them. Then tell me, below, in your own words, not a slogan, not a verse you copied, but the truth. What did you feel when you understood what those seconds were? And tell me what we should stand inside next, while there is still time to look. The families in Caracas did not get to choose the length of their gap. None of us do. We do not set the distance between the warning and the wait. We are only ever given a space and a choice of what to do inside it. Theirs was 39 seconds. Yours has been longer, years longer. The plagues were a tremor. The wars were a tremor. The ground splitting in divers places, exactly as he said, was a tremor. Foreshock after foreshock, and the gaps closing, and a mercy in every one of them you could still feel if you stopped too. You have stopped too. That is why you are still here. So I will not tell you what it means. You already know what it means. The ground has been speaking for a long time. The only thing left to decide is whether you are still in the building.